Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Welcome to the show at Rise Up Show with me, your host, the Queen Bee, Dani. How are you feeling? As we chat this morning to the devilishly handsome, the fabulously wonderful, the incredibly knowledgeable Mr. Fidel Bohill, the modern man. Good morning. Jodie Sol, good morning. Fab Naredi, good morning. Elise Woodbine, good morning. The devilishly handsome Ian Dixon, good morning, sir.
Shut up, for f***'s sake. Jesus.
The fantastic Lizzie Jackson Barrett, good morning. Josephine Sandra, everybody, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. We've got a bit of a different angle situation going on this morning, and in fact going forward. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Welcome to the show, Rise Up Show with me, your host, Dani Wallace. How are you? Are you good? Get on in here for a cuddle. How are we doing? Owena Naomi Ella is here. Hello. Owena, hello. It's lovely to see one of our incredible Be-inspired speakers who graced the stage just a couple of weeks ago. Can you believe it was almost 2 weeks ago? It's 2 weeks since Be-inspired Eve. How insane is that? Absolutely mental. Good morning to the gorgeous CS Ivory. How are you? Diane Ivory in the house today. Good morning, Amy Blaney. It's Scorchio. She's in there. I love it. She's in there with the weather this morning. Scorchio in Norwich. Finally uploaded my VBC. More on that in just a second. Good morning, the gorgeous Claire Chamberlain. Yo, yiggity yo. How you doing? Yes, of course there's stars in your eyes because she absolutely went and ripped it up. Good morning, everybody. I hope you are all well. Get on in here. Come and have a cuddle this Wednesday. Wow. It has been a bit of a 24 hours in IATQB land. In fact, it's been a bit of a few weeks, hasn't it? Let's be perfectly honest. So I'm going to talk to you today. I have no guest for you this morning. There's a couple of things I want to talk to you about. First of all, I want to shout out to all of my challenges in the house. Where are my challenges at? Make yourselves known in the comments. Holler at everybody that is taking part in the IATQB Be Heard So You Want to Be a Speaker challenge. Yesterday was just insane. We did the first of our sessions. So there is, I mean, you can still go and catch up. You can still, hang on a second, let me sort myself out. You can still go and catch up. You can still go and see how to get amongst it. You can still go and do the learning that's part of the challenge. You are most welcome to go to the IATQB Hive, which is my community, where this week we are really slaying those visibility dragons, really slaying those speaking dragons, really getting out of our own way and starting to speak about our mission and our businesses in a way that is really engaging, and the way that we're doing that. So yesterday we started to peel back the layers of the onions, really started to understand why is it that we get in our own way about speaking specifically. Now, there's lots of reasons and lots of psychological reasons and all of that sort of stuff. And I go through it much more in depth and from an understanding point of view in the Be Heard So You Want to Be a Speaker course. But this week, I want to make sure I'm giving everybody as much value as I possibly can. So we started to look at what our limiting beliefs are around speaking and what our reframes can be. And we also looked at something called a vocal business card. So a vocal business card is a way of introducing yourself. So if you do want to go and catch more about that, head on over into the IATQB Hive. Catch up on yesterday's live at 10:30 today. We are going with day 2. Who is ready to hit up day 2? Really, really excited. Yeah, yesterday was wow. And the thing is, Jenny, what's really interesting about this challenge, and the people that will have done this challenge before will completely attest to this, is that the changes that you will see in just 3 days will be phenomenal. So lots of people, for the first time yesterday, went live. Like, some people have never been live before that are taking part in this challenge. And they went live for the first time yesterday, like for the first time ever, or for the first time in a long time, because they got in their own way about, oh, it's been too long now, I can't possibly start to live stream again, or live streaming is a real issue for me. So they've done it in this really safe space in the IATQB hive. And where you're started is not where you're going to end up. Here's the exciting bit about doing this challenge is that the progress in just a couple of short days is phenomenal. Jenny, I'm glad Debbie Sturge added me in here and recommended the challenge. I'm so glad that you decided to get amongst it, Jenny. I'm so happy that you're here. You're all ready for day 2. I love it. If you're not taking part in the challenge, it's all right. You're welcome to the conversation today. This is the show at Wise Up, Rise Up show. This is my daily conversation with y'all about what is going on in the world. Now, ordinarily, we have lots of different guests that come in from lots of different backgrounds. Whilst it's challenge week, I don't really want to detract too much from what it is that we're trying to do. So this morning, I just thought, I'd come and get ready for the challenge in here with you. One of the ways that I started this show was by just getting up in the morning and getting ready for the workday, so that I did. At the beginning of lockdown, there was a very real risk that I was not going to get up in the morning, that I was going to stay in bed later and later and later. And of course, the show was a real great way to stop that from happening, to stop staying in bed and just to get the F up and get some stuff done. So I'd get up in the morning, I'd put my makeup on and talk to you guys whilst I was getting ready for the work day. Now it's switched up a little bit now, and we have guests from all over the world, guests from all different sorts of backgrounds, bringing all sorts of conversations to the table. Particularly, we like talking about things like mental health awareness. We talk a lot of survivor stories. We also talk a lot of business type stuff. We have lots of copywriters, business strategists. We have leadership strategists that are in here as well. Money mindset specialists, money coaches, accountants, all sorts of people in here that help share really important messages to give you guys access to as many different conversations as possible. So we're particularly looking for right now members of any marginalized communities to come forward and share the stage, share the microphone here, and share their stories or share their learnings and their value with their businesses. So any members of the Black community, any members of the Asian community, any members of the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, it's a non-exhaustive list. Any members of the disabled community, particularly, I'm looking for you guys. So if you know of anybody who has a fantastic story or who wants to share their business or their mission on the show at Wise Up Rise Up show, please do point them in my direction. I would love to have them on. So as part of our wider mission to be more inclusive, to wade through the difficult conversations that often we have to have as we become more awake, as we become more forward thinking, as we become more progressive. It's important that we have as many different voices as possible, because if it's all straight white women that are on here talking, guess whose viewpoint we're going to get on live? And it's all right. Like, I've got that bit covered. So that's not to deter, of course, any straight white women or straight white men, for example, to come onto the show. But I am particularly looking for a diverse offering for you guys, so we can bring as many perspectives to the table as possible. Speaking of perspectives, I watched this morning GMTV. No, it wasn't GMT. I was showing the age there, aren't I? I'm watching Good Morning Britain. So I've been more inclined, now that Piers Morgan has left the scene, I've been more inclined to watch GMTV. Good Morning Britain. I'll get it right. Good Morning Britain. Because even though I think sometimes the conversations are a little bit swayed and a little bit biased, it actually brings some of those contentious issues to the table and allows for debate. And it is heading more in that direction. However, the difficulty around that is that sometimes there's lots of egos in that space that really want to almost argue for the sake of arguing. Now, I'm not here for that. What I am here for is healthy conversation, and in some respects healthy disagreement, and that's okay. We can disagree on shit, that's all right, as long as we're not knobheads to each other. And the only thing that frustrates me, I guess, about the Good Morning Britain situation is that sometimes it gets a little bit catty. But this morning, and the reason why I'm talking to you about this is because it really struck a chord with me, and also it featured the glorious Nikki Hodgson, who was on our Media Matters panel for Be Inspired. So if you did catch Be Inspired, we had a panel right at the end, a bonus panel that featured members of national press. So Nikki Hodgson, we had on the panel. She is a broadcaster, she's a journalist, she's an author, she's fantastic. She really got a finger on the pulse of relationships. That's firmly where she sits her expertise. And this morning, they were talking about Disney. And on the latest revamp of the Disney ride in Disneyland or Disney World, wherever it is, maybe it's Florida, I don't know. There is a scene out of Snow White. If you haven't come across it, it is 80 years old. I think the majority of us have come across the concept of Snow White. But at the end, Snow White has eaten a poisoned apple from her wicked stepmom. And she's led, the dwarves have laid her out in this like glass casket type thing. And the prince comes along and kisses her while she is essentially comatose. Now then, this has created some backlash from critics, and therefore, of course, a show like Good Morning Britain has taken that on board and started to talk about how controversial actually is it. How controversial actually is it that still a company as big as Disney, whose, ethos and values sit within blue sky thinking, sit with it, the whole term of blue sky thinking actually stemmed, I think, from Disney itself. Forward thinking, progressive in so many ways. Actually, is it perpetuating really old ideals by allowing that narrative to continue? So what I mean is it appropriate? And I'm not saying whether it is or it isn't, because I just want to talk about this. Is it appropriate that we are still showing Prince Charming kissing Snow White whilst she is asleep in order to wake up? Where is the responsibility? So there were two sides to the argument, because they do, one of the things that they are good at doing is showing kind of the poles of the argument, the north and the south, if you will. And Nikki was on speaking for the fact that it was consent. So consent is necessary. It's not showing consent. It's an archaic view. And actually that should be revisited and addressed by Disney. And there was somebody else that came on who said, actually, it's not Disney's prerogative to drive that conversation. It's our jobs as parents or caregivers of kids to have that conversation. I am interested this morning, you lot. What do you think? Because I was like, ooh, I'm not sure, actually. And I messaged Nikki afterwards and I was like, yeah, she smashed it, because it got quite heated. Nikki was like, no, it's absolutely archaic. If we want to drive a narrative where actually we want consent to be a normal part of society, that where it comes to consenting over, men's interaction with us or anybody's interaction with us. And this was an interesting thing as well. The conversation I have with my kids around consent does involve like roughhousing and sort of physical play between the two of them. I took the girls swimming on Sunday, and Poppy, in her boisterousness, because she's a little bit of a tomboy, that's how she identifies. She was kind of roughhousing with her sister, and Daisy had just had enough, and she was like, stop. And Poppy persisted. So I had to say, look, you need to stop. She's told you no. She said, no, I don't want you to do that anymore. It's your job to stop, because this is a conversation we need to have with all of our kids, whether they are male, female, non-binary or trans or whatever. Here, Amy, what are we saying? I'm stuck. I don't know where I sit. I get both sides of the argument. Yeah, same. And that's why I kind of wanted to just riff on it this morning with you guys and see what you all thought. Do you think it's a really archaic way of being, but do we honor the fact that it was of its time and have the appropriate conversations with our kids right now about it? Or do we say to Disney, actually, this isn't really something we should be celebrating or perpetuating anymore? Or do Disney need to come out with some sort of additional reading to sit alongside Snow White, and we can no longer take these kinds of fairy tales at face value anymore? Do we need new fairy tales? This is like, it really got me thinking this morning. I was like, I'm really glad I'm not glad that I don't have a guest this morning. I would quite like a guest who was like down for this conversation and was more of a, what's the word? More of an expert than I, because I'm just learning about this stuff. So this week, the consent topic is coming up left, right, and center. It's coming up all over the place right now. In like, so EYFS, so early years at school, we've got Ivy. So Ivy's 5 years old, has a talk coming up in school. I'm just looking at my phone to try and find the email that I received. So the NSPCC visits schools to talk about consent with children as young as 5, which is absolutely, yes, please. The more empowered our children are to hold their physical boundaries and their emotional boundaries, say yes or no to things that they want to say yes and no to. But it's a really odd one to speak, not odd, difficult conversation to have with the older community. Do you not find? So I like having a conversation with myself here because it really interested me. So we've got the NSPCC are watching, so they have what they call a PANTS rule, PANTS, PANTS, a PANTS rule, which explains the importance of keeping parts of our body private. And they have this whole thing like around it's like this Pantosaurus and what have you. It's and again, I absolutely am totally here for, keeping our children safe. Where's the line between shame and safety? That's something that is on the table here with this. Cat. Hello, Cat. Peeping over. We saw some kids out last week and the boys were roughhousing the girl. And my partner said to me, oh, he's only doing it because he likes her. That's a difficult one, which opened up an interesting conversation for us about consent, and also that boys are sometimes given the message in the media that if a girl says no, they should keep making romantic gestures to win her over. And I think, Kat, that there is conversation to be had on either side of this, because I think that the media and films and books and stuff like Snow White, I guess, is that actually what we're looking for in a man is persistence. That sometimes no doesn't actually mean no, even though it does, like it should and it does, but we're not teaching, are we really teaching our kids and our teenagers the no, that actually, if I'm going to say no to this advance, then I expect the advance to cease. There's this, once it becomes persistent, it becomes manipulation, doesn't it? Yeah, exactly. Never tell a girl a boy is hurting her to show he likes it. That is a dangerous place to be. Boudica, good morning. I think that there are so many issues with many Disney and similar films, but they're a great point to start conversations with kids along the lines, particularly along the lines of how would you feel if, and I think that's pretty much where I'm at. That I said to Nikki this morning, I dropped Nikki a message and I was like, you absolutely smashed it. Well done for repping. Because it's part of her job as broadcaster journalist, as part of those sorts of panels, to really sit on the polar side, to sit within their beliefs around, is this Disney's job? Is this a parent's job? Whose job is it to be pushing this consent issue? And I think the true answer is that I think it's a degree of both. But how do we then enjoy and celebrate the art and the kids' films of old? Is it just that they're no longer relevant at all? Like if we go to the Grimm's Brothers fairy tales, they're grim. If you look at The Little Mermaid, for example, like Disney created a beautiful situation out of that Little Mermaid, because actually, the idea is that when she walked, it felt like she was walking on glass every time that she walked. So the idea is that this woman, this girl, young girl, in fact, is going through excruciating pain in order to experience the world. Like the Grimm's fairy tales, they really are that. They are grim. There are some awful, awful things that happen, particularly to the women in there. Where is the spot for it? So Disney could have been accused in the past of sort of whitewashing in more ways than one. The narrative or the real story surrounded it and kind of Disneyfied it. So when we talk about Disneyfication of something, all of a sudden it becomes more beautiful, more palatable, more acceptable. Is that where we're going for children's entertainment? Is that where we are going for children's entertainment? Do our kids want that? And I'm with a lot of you thinking around, you know, is this do I want everything to be palatable? And that is at odds with that. I want to keep Ivy innocent. She doesn't really necessarily need to know the ins and outs of how dark the world actually is. But how do you keep them safe? It's a funny one, isn't it? So interesting. But yeah, it was this morning, and I said to Nikki, like, I was shouting, yeah, go girl. Like, we want to be holding the bigger companies like Disney, for example, accountable for the messages that we have going forward. And then the rest, I guess, is a riff on history. So this is Snow White, and in and of itself, it's actually a lovely story. However, can you see anything that's problematic here? And begin those conversations at home. You can't change that. Here, look at Love Actually, Andrew Lincoln. See, the things that we loved years ago have become problematic the more we understand what's actually going on here. Andrew Lincoln with the signs, it's framed as romantic, but looking at it now, she's in a relationship and he's making a grand gesture. For what reason? I'll leave my principle. You've got it. And we're watching and enjoying these things for the sake of, watching and enjoying them now. But things become quite problematic. And we do watch it now because, Christmas. But it is, how do we, it's the funny old expectation that we have, and it extends out to our expectations of each other within relationships, particularly at the start of relationships, where we do put on our best selves or sometimes our worst selves right at the beginning of relationships. What is that about? How do we make that better? I would be interested if any of you know any experts around this who want to come and have a discussion specifically around those sorts of Disney roles and this whole consent thing. I would love to have somebody on to talk about that. Can I just big up B&M's, by the way? That I know this is plastic. I'm really sorry for this is not one usable plastic. I'm gonna be using this for as long as I possibly can. But this is a 2.2 litre bottle from the B&M's at $3.99, and I know that by the time I've got to the end of this for the day, I am adequately hydrated. It's just big. It's like one of them big vats. If anyone's been to like an Oktoberfest or something like that and got a steiner of beer and then realised that it's as big as their head, it's kind of like that. But you do know that actually you are getting the hydration that you need. So yeah, it is very, very, very reusable, Danielle. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to just riff on with you, I think, this morning. Get us thinking about it. Where does the responsibility lie? How do we throw these into normal conversations? Do we still expose our kids? And it sounds awful, doesn't it? Exposing your kids to things like, Bambi or Snow White or Cinderella, is the whole rhetoric around someday my prince will come furthering the fact that the women are seeking validation in being a part of a partnership. Interesting. Hello, Facebook user. Who is this? I do think we underestimate how much our children can understand, and sometimes making things too palatable can make it harder for them in future as they come back down to earth with a bump. I hear this. I read a book about Danish parenting, and the norm there is to not beautify everything so they grow up with more understanding. I hope that makes sense. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And I think, here's the thing. It's not really about over beautifying everything to make it even. There's beauty already. And what about actually having those conversations instead of going for these ideals of beauty? Where is the beauty in the everyday? Where is the beauty in now? Where is the beauty in mindfulness? Where is the beauty actually? Let's have a real look at this. Very, very interesting. It never occurred to me the issue of consent is Snow White. I'm not sure what I think. Yeah, I wasn't either. Because I was like, I watched Snow White with my kids, it is, we all grew up with it. It's 80 years old. If you're watching this show, you grew up with Snow White. You grew up with the Seven Dwarfs. You grew up with the fact that, she went to go and be a homemaker for 7 other men. And then she was, kissed in her sleep. Like, it starts to get quite dark. I definitely think that we should use these as starting points for conversations. I'm not sure you can cancel or change Snow White and other classic Disney films. Yeah, then this is it, isn't it? What do we do? Do we nod to our past and move the conversation, use it as a catalyst to move the conversation forward? Hey, can you see how this will be problematic? Please make sure that, don't kiss girls in the sleep, mate. To our boys, I think there would be too much pushback that would drown out the potential conversation. And there is this thing about cancel culture, isn't it? About going back and then deleting the things that were there. And actually what probably we need to do is accept things happen and allow them to generate conversations and a catalyst for change going forward, and not maybe glorify. If a brand as universal as Disney can stick to keeping all content within the realms of consent, safety, and individuality with all new actions, it sets an example. Yeah, it's like doing better because we know better now, isn't it? My daughter is almost 7. Hi, Natalie. Is so having lots of conversations about bodies and difference, and everyone is beautiful. Most importantly, teaching her to love every bit of herself, but no, it starts with me. Right. And this is kind of where I'm sitting as I am mooching this out with you. Danielle, the types of TV programs and TV show that I watched as a child will probably not be shown now. Even things like Friends, if you look at some of the narrative in Friends, is problematic in some way. The fat shaming that happens in Friends is really quite vicious. At times, Monica was a bigger girl, and there's a lot of shame that sits around that. So yeah, really, really interested to see actually what would fly now. And the difficulty that our TV producers and creators have now is, what do we make funny if we're not poking fun at the things that are alien? It's a Pandora's box, isn't it? It's a massive Pandora's box. Yes, they have a huge platform for showing change. Excellent call. Yeah, it's the decisions they make going forward. Here's what we did. Here's what we learned. We can still acknowledge this, and this, these were the stories that were written hundreds of years ago, or tens of years ago, or whatever. And these are the stories that we write now, given our change in history, given our accessibility to more narratives, I guess, our accessibility to more lived experiences, so that we can bring all these together and create better art. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I thought of Friends when I was thinking about Love Actually. A lot of the things that, especially I'm in my late 30s now, approaching 40, and think about some of the things that I was watching growing up. And in my teenage years, again, Dawson's Creek was an interesting one as well. I went back at the beginning of this year and binge watched with glee Dawson's Creek from beginning to end, but some of it was a little problematic. It was a little bit sort of male possessive, and it was interesting with regards to how much turmoil Joey was in because of the way that the two boys were behaving. Team Pacey, by the way. Absolutely Team Pacey. So yeah, we should use our history to learn and make things different in the future, but in a correct way. Yeah, and the thing is, I'm going to say it just for controversy's sake, but what's correct? What's correct? I think where we don't bring our kids, to conversations that are going to cause them harm or cause people around us harm. So there's lots of conversations that we need to have around race, around gender, around, around sex, around communication, around protection, all sorts of stuff. Here, look, Amy, yes, mate. Gaston in Beauty and the Beast was relentless. Younger me watched it and kind of felt for him because he loved it. Older me is like, oh, I see where my shit tasting men came from. It was Gaston's fault, And in some ways, when you watch these things, you say, oh, you can see that at the time they were trying to be progressive. So Belle, she was allowing herself to be different. Her values didn't sit within her beauty. Her values sat within her love of books and all of that. But yet still there was this male antagonist who was absolutely incessant. Good thing for her is that she absolutely held her own. She then fell victim to Stockholm syndrome when another guy aggressively kept her hostage interesting narratives from Disney. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting to riff this morning. Sometimes I do like to do this. Sometimes I like to just hop on and throw these conversations on the floor and see what you lot have to say. We spend so many mornings sort of in conversation directly with our guests that I really wanted to, invite you all to the conversation and see what it is. It's a part of educating myself as well and helping me understand where I sit in the whole thing. I think we have to remember sometimes we put an adult perspective on certain things that do go over children's head. Yeah, and I think, if you think about that, Daniela, as well, writers are very clever these days. So in much the same way that the writers of pantomime would write for both adult and children audiences, so the children would be, we're loving the interaction or would love the noise, I guess, and the magic and the costumes and the colours of pantomime. Actually, for pantomime, a lot of the jokes are aimed at adults. A lot of the jokes are aimed at adults. Shrek, another perfect example. A lot of the jokes are aimed at the adults. They're dual audience now. And these writers and these creators know that they're speaking to two audiences, and they're quite clever. The thing that I'm finding is that our kids are being given more of a dialogue. They're being given more language about this now. So it's becoming young. I've already noticed it between my eldest niece at nearly 15 and my youngest daughter at 5. The things I was speaking to my eldest niece about 10 years ago, very, 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 very different to what I speak to my daughter at 5 years old now. So yeah, again, it's something that they've got to tread carefully around, or we've got to be more careful around our conversations off the back of it, and we flag up something that's problematic and say to them, hey, you see how this might not work, really. I've always loved Beauty and the Beast, but didn't like that he changed at the end, preferred the Beast. Like, he was much more handsome as the Beast, right? I think we have to remember we've done that one. So yeah, the writers are very clever, really, really clever. It is difficult, as some kids do pick up things early. Yeah, they absolutely do. They do. And I don't think there is, in this particular conversation this morning, I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. I just think it's worth us exploring. I think it's worth us having this conversation. I just think I always find it fascinating, and I love to explore it with you all, because this show is about having the uncomfortable conversations or the interesting conversations, and that might inform something that you do with your kids, or that might inform something you may do differently in the future, or you might have a different kind of conversation based on this. And I think that that's just a beautiful thing to be able to facilitate. He was much cuter as a fuzzbot. Yeah. I've loved this conversation too, Daniela. It has been brilliant to share this space with you this morning whilst we talk about this. It's been really interesting to see where some of us stand. I think a lot of us are kind of in the same spot as me, as they've just started to question it and going, maybe that wasn't quite right, that I was kind of exposed to that. Maybe we should have more conversations about this. Kind of related, has anyone noticed how depressing most nursery rhymes are? They're quite shocking, but they're classics, so will we ever change them? That's the thing. It's, will we ever change them? Do we have to change them, or do we have to change the narrative when we're sharing them? Now, it's very, very difficult to start a conversation about the plague, for example, when you're teaching your 2-3-year-old Ring a Ring of Roses, because that's where exactly that. Melanie, Ring a Ring of Roses. Do we start to talk about the plague with our kids at 2 and 3? Or do we keep that on for tradition and then talk about that later on? But yeah, it is. I mean, some of these are seated in history, and that, I think that's the real crux of the conversation now. I think it is, and this is the same again for the way that race is portrayed, the way that genders are portrayed. I watched 2 things recently that were a fascinating watch and really got me thinking. The first thing that I watched was A Life in a Year, featuring Cara Delevingne and Will Smith's son, Jaden. And the premise is that there's this young girl and she's got cancer, and he and she fall in love, and he sees her through to the end of her life, essentially, is what it is. But there is a trans character in there whose sole job, unlike many trans characters in other films, whose sole job is to just be a parent. It's to just be a parent. And that was a real normalizing of having a trans member of the community as part of a film, because often what happens with members of the trans community, and this is again, like, this is all sorts of things going on here, members of the trans community in films often meet violent ends once they've served a purpose. There's all sorts of things that happen to our members of the trans community. And then when we've got things like Pose coming through, or we've got things like this, A Life in a Year, where actually we just have normal trans people being in normal roles in normal life, that's when the conversation starts to really have impact. That when it no longer becomes violent. The other thing that I watched that made me very uncomfortable, and I probably won't watch something like this again, and I don't know where you guys sit on this, but I watched Them on Amazon Prime, which was about a Black family who moved into a white area of Compton, California, and were haunted not just by the people around them, but also by this paranormal activity that went on. Now, the family essentially were a very, very strong family. It was a lot of trauma, race trauma that was happening within there that made it an uncomfortable watch. And I wonder if does more of that need to be made? Is there enough of that to provide an education so that we can look at the joy in our Black communities? We can celebrate the incredible things about our Black communities instead of just all of the trauma all of the time. I don't know what the right answer is. But yeah, you knew I was going to say Them. There were some things in there that felt a bit like trauma porn. That it was there to, yes, I get it, that we need to be made to feel uncomfortable, to realize that some of these things did happen. And, I watched it with Poppy, with my 13-year-old, and she was like, God, I had to explain to her about black and white minstrels. And again, it was my job in that moment to have that conversation with her, to explain to her, this was really wrong. This was a wrong thing that used to happen. There's a lot of trauma in there, but yeah, it was a horrid watch. And at the end, it kind of came to a conclusion, and I got it. And the family were an incredibly strong family, and they were a strong Black family, and that's what we need to see more of. But did we have to put them through so much trauma in order to create that? I would argue not. There is enough there to provide conversations with. I think we should be celebrating more in going forward. When you first put your feminine glasses on, it's all really bloody depressing because you can see problems all over the place. I know. Natalie, I loved Schitt's Creek, which normalized gay relationships and all types of relationships and differences. Not obviously is essentially a comedy, but was so clever as it was just the way things were unquestioned and accepted. And that is, I think, that's the progression of it, isn't it? That within our kids' cartoons, within our kids' like Netflix series and what have you, within new Disney films, that these things just become the norm, so that actually when we do have a look at a history lesson, we can say, hey, this is how we've progressed, this is where we've gone, and not cancel out the fact that was there, but actually we can chart our progression based on the art that we produce. And I think, in summary, that takes us to the end of the conversation. Thank you for joining me this morning as we have riffed on this together. It has been beautiful as ever just to chat with you guys and know you better. Thank you for your open minds. Thank you for your open hearts. I'm so proud of us as a community for allowing ourselves to bring these conversations to the table and not be frightened of them, because if we're frightened of them, then we can't make any change. And the whole idea of the show, the whole idea of the IATQB movement is that we get to be even an incremental change in making things better all the way across the situation, whatever the situation is, the world, the globe, whatever it is. But yeah, I love it. So in closing, that we stop labeling things is what we should be aiming for. No labels are needed. Yeah, I get it. And we've got to also acknowledge as well the lived experience of the people around us. So again, another conversation maybe for another time is when people say, I don't see colour. Well, what you're doing is you're really negating somebody's lived experience. You're negating somebody's culture. You're negating somebody's time, you know, by saying, oh, I don't see color, I don't see gender, I don't think we're there yet. I think we've got to be able to see that to be able to move forward together. But yes, thank you so much. You lot are bloody marvelous. I love you. Hivers, those of you that are in my free community, the IATQB Hive, get yourselves over there at 10:30 for day 2. I didn't mean to swear then. Day 2 of the Be Heard So You Want to Be a Speaker challenge. If you are not part of the challenge, please make sure that you've got 8 p.m. on Friday in your diaries, because I'm going to be premiering the brand new IATQB promo video. It made me cry. I hope it will make you proud to be part of this community when you do see it. I hope it will make you proud of us and everything that we're achieving together. Please do tune in 8 p.m. on Friday as I premiere for you guys the new IATQB promo video. And also, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about charisma. All right, my darlings, have an incredible day. Happy hump day to you all. I will see you tomorrow, bright and breezy, for some more showing up, wising up, and rising up. Tra.